Do you believe in a virgin birth? Do you believe in an immaculate conception? Is it even possible? Not many are aware, especially outside the Roman Catholic Church, that the virgin birth of a babe in a manger was actually preceded by the birth of Mary, his mother, whose parents had born her without intercourse, permitting her to be born without sin. And 2 Christmas seasons have gone by since, as the new year was dawning. Reports of the emergence of a pneumonia of unknown etiological origin began to surface in the Hubei province, primarily located in the city of Wuhan. And to date, much still remains unknown about a novel coronavirus, including the exact animal source from which it was alleged to have zoonotically evolved. Most recently, Dr. Anthony Fauci has claimed that the Beijing government had probably destroyed the evidence that had been recovered at the wet market, which he continues to insist was the most likely source of the outbreak. Essentially like the Big Bang Theory, the zoonotic source for a novel coronavirus remains essentially a story of a secular, immaculate birth in science. And so for the next few moments, we shall, in the holiday spirit, be comparing converging themes for a pandemic pathogen that even this year continues to be that Grinch that stole Christmas. The best way to conduct a scientific inquiry is to methodologically collect all possible forensic evidence that continues to exist from the very beginning, rather than simply hypothesizing based upon no empirical data at all. And in a robust report spanning 120 pages, World Public Health authorities did exactly that at the beginning of this year, with findings that directly disputed claims by even ABC News in April 2020 regarding evidence of COVID-19 in China dating back as early as November 2019. Information that they had attributed to intelligence sources that intelligence sources denied. In fact, in February 2021, after review of exactly 76,253 medical records examining for influenza-like illness, or ILI, and acute respiratory illness, or ARI, data, and extending back to September 2019. Medical experts at the World Health Organization had determined that by December 31st, 2019, there were only a total of 174 cases of COVID-19 in China. 174. A number only 4 times higher than the total of only 41 cases in China reported by January 14, 2020. And only 27 of which, primarily vendors and not customers, were determined by science at that time to have been connected to the Hunan wholesale seafood market, a venue measuring the size of 9 American football fields in the largest city in the central mainland and 42nd largest city in the world, somewhere between 8 and 11 million people. Examining ILI depth, like a scientist, it was determined that the earliest onset of disease had occurred on probably December 2nd, 2021, with the first confirmed case occurring on December 8th, 2019. The second Sunday of Advent for those in the Christian faith, but also for many in the Roman Catholic denomination, the celebration of the feast day of the Immaculate Conception, a public holiday in only one U.S. territory, the unincorporated territory of Guam. Those familiar with the history of the novel coronavirus might find some irony in the reference to the island of Guam, located amongst the Pacific Islands in near proximity to the Marianas Trench, because beginning on March 23, 2020, according to ILI records that have been examined by U.S. Navy investigators, an outbreak began aboard that Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which by June 5th had been attributed to over 1,400 infections, as well as reinfections among the crew in that short span of time, and resulting in the first fatality on active duty of a service member who had become identified as infected on April 3rd, 2020, and was found unresponsive in his quarantine room 10 days later on April 13th, 2020, the day on which he died at the age of 43. The first active duty member to be infected had occurred on February 26th, 2020, in Daegu, a very religious community that had become a hotspot for the infections in the Republic of South Korea. But of significance in the narrative that had been developed by naval investigators who had rigorously examined sick call records of origin-stricken warship, just like the emergence of the novel coronavirus in China in December, no single person aboard has yet been identified as the cause of the outbreak. And ILI data have confirmed that the virus had not infected a sailor who had returned to the ship up the gangplank when the warship had departed its last port of call in Da Nang, Vietnam, nor aboard helicopter ferries that had transported visitors from the Philippines before commencing what appears to be, on all evidence, an attack against the flight deck crew and reactor technical personnel aboard a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Before the pandemic, roughly 78% of Americans would self-identify as being Christian in 318,000 churches, regardless of having a church membership or engaging in regular devotional worship. And with some notable exceptions, such as the Unitarian Universalist Church, some 73% adhere to the belief in an Immaculate Conception and virgin birth, with the strongest belief in the Roman Catholic denomination, amongst whom the Feast of the Immaculate Conception is celebrated as a public holiday in places like Spain and Malta. But surprisingly, the notion of a virgin birth did not become the official doctrine of even the Roman Catholic Church until the mid-19th century, when the Ineffabilis Deus in 1854 under Pope Pius was written, but was opposed by most Protestants at the time, including Eastern Orthodoxy, that reveres the matron figure in their church doctrines. And most objections at that time arose for political reasons by those who saw the move by the Vatican as an assertion of power. Yet more surprisingly, rejection of the virgin birth historically has found some very famous opponents, such as the liberal theology advocate Harry Emerson Fosdick, the former pastor of the Riverside Baptist Church in Manhattan, but also St. Thomas Aquinas. However, many of these debates focused more upon philosophical reconciliation of doctrines, which are more the concerns of theologians and not the typical person attending a worship service in a pew. Some questions that vex theologians include the notion of whether an immaculate birth would violate the prophecy regarding a lineage of the Messiah from the familial line of King David, or considerations as to how the ability of a deity to create a perfect Mary without sin might negate the necessity for the birth of a Savior for mankind, or simply considerations regarding a perfect Son of God being able to spring from a mortal, which in many Greek myths had only resulted in the birth of demigods, such as Achilles. The more scientific arguments have considered simply the instances that have occurred in nature, such as with Komodo dragons. But at least on Guam, a controversy that arose regarding rejecting the Virgin Mary culminated that year in a typhoon that arose on that year, where they also discovered from the sea an image of the Virgin Mary that has continued to be placed on display and has survived countless typhoons, tornadoes, and earthquakes. So with the emergence of a new descendant variant of concern, the Omicron variant eclipsing the Delta variant in dominance just in time for Christmas, and the surprise breakthrough infections of Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren, two former presidential candidates, which not even they have been able to determine the source of their infection. While many may be canceling plans to celebrate holidays together with family and friends, there is just one seasonal thought to ponder as a scientist. Do you believe in the Immaculate Conception and birth of a novel coronavirus? And have yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Now. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.